I want to talk to you guys about something that really grinded my gears recently, okay? Really angered me. And that was Elon Musk's Twitter labeling NPR, National Public Radio, as state-affiliated media. Now, obviously, I'm going to use the NPR article for this because, you know, big brain 5D, 6D chess moves. This really not only threw me for a loop, this really kind of came out of left field, but is just unbelievably hypocritical. And it doesn't make any sense considering the standing policy that Twitter has had. Let's read a little bit about it, and then I'm going to get into my thoughts and then talk about Elon Musk, how he is currently sponsoring a state censorship campaign. He's censoring on behalf of a foreign government. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, let's give a little introduction to this. Twitter added a state-affiliated media tag to NPR's main account on Tuesday, applying the same label to the nonprofit media company that Twitter uses to designate official state mouthpieces and propaganda outlets in countries such as Russia and China. NPR operates independently of the U.S. government, and while federal money is important for the overall public media system, NPR gets less than 1% of its annual budget on average from federal sources. Noting the millions of listeners who support and rely on NPR for independent fact-based journalism, NPR CEO John Lansing stated, NPR stands for freedom of speech and holding the powerful accountable. It is unacceptable for Twitter to label us this way. A vigorous, vibrant free press is essential for the health of our democracy. NPR officials have asked Twitter to remove this label. They initially assumed it was applied by mistake. NPR spokesperson Isabel Laura said, "We were not warned. It happened quite suddenly last night." In response to an NPR email for the story seeking comment and requesting details about what in particular might have led to the new designation, the company's press account auto-replied with a poop emoji. A message it has been sending to journalists for weeks. When asked about Twitter's decision during the White House's daily briefing, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre declined to address Twitter's content rules specifically, but she defended NPR's journalism. There is no doubt of the independence of NPR journalists, Jean-Pierre said. If you've ever been on the receiving end of their questions, you know this. One last section we read, and then I'll get into my opinion about it. Seems accurate, Musk says of state-affiliated label. Twitter's owner and CEO Elon Musk acknowledged the new tag was applied to NPR. Responding to a tweet about the shift, Musk posted an image of a screenshot showing Twitter's policy defining state-affiliated media with the short message, "Seems accurate." So let's read this. This is NPR. That's Elon Musk for "seems accurate." Let's see. State-affiliated media is defined as outlets where the state exercises control over the editorial content through financial resources, direct or indirect political pressures, and or control over production and distribution, Twitter Help Center reads. Okay, I have a lot to say about this because him saying this seems accurate just shows a complete, like a level of ignorance that is unbelievable on Elon Musk's part. But let's finish this last paragraph, and then we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna talk about my anger around this. As recently as Tuesday, Twitter's policy pages stated explicitly that NPR would not be included in this label before the wording was altered to remove NPR. State-financed media organizations with editorial independence like the BBC in the UK or NPR in the US, for example, are not defined as state-affiliated media for the purpose of this policy, the document said. That language echoes an explanation that Twitter gave in 2020 when it announced the state-affiliated media label. At least one page on Twitter is still listed NPR as an exception as of late morning Wednesday. Okay, so if you go further in this article, it talks about where NPR gets its funds from local affiliates, from, you know, average donors, and the 1% from the federal government. It also talks about how former Twitter executives, former Twitter staff are reacting to this very negatively, saying this is creating a false equivalence between something like Russia Today, where the Russian government exerts editorial control over its media, and NPR, which it does not. And that is the main point I want to hit on. Now, first, the fact that there's an auto reply with a poop emoji shows that Elon Musk, and this is the journalist, by the way, journalist asking like, hey, you applied state media to our account. That's a problem. And by the way, when you have state media applied to your account, it's not just, oh, you have state media logo applied to your account. As you can see here, they have US state affiliate media. It's not just that it has the label on it, and that can cause some confusion and think that NPR is like working on behalf of the US government or is the mouthpiece for the US government. It also comes with an algorithmic deprioritization, meaning that NPR's tweets are going to be undercut by the algorithm on Twitter. So NPR is getting penalized for being state affiliated media. And that, by the way, we're going to talk about why I don't think it is. And it means that that NPR's tweets are now going to be deprioritized by the algorithm. So not only is this going to cause confusion and have less people trust NPR's reporting, which is really, really, really good, but it is also going to lead to them performing is going to lead to them performing worse on the platform. So where's my problems with this? Well, first off, my first problem with this is the not only the Twitter emoji, the poop Twitter emoji thing, which I think is immature, stupid, and I'm honestly sick of Elon Musk's like, haha, he, look at me, I'm so quirky, I'm so wacky, ha, poop emoji, haha. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. Like, he's running one of the largest social media companies on the planet, right? It has done massive layoffs. It has changed its policies rapidly. It's charging people. It's asking to charge people like $8 a month for you to get Twitter verification. And you're supposed to pay $8 a month to somebody who hasn't even taken the job seriously. Somebody who, by the way, promised to step down if he was voted to step down in a Twitter poll. They vote for him stepping down in the Twitter poll. He's still the CEO. He's still running the company. He still hasn't stepped down. He said he would. Now he's like, he's putting it off. He's putting it off. So that's still peeving me off as well. But putting aside how Elon Musk is acting like a petulant child, let's talk about the state affiliated marking. So going back to Elon Musk's definition. Now, as the article said, they used two examples originally before they changed it. It was NPR and BBC of government funded media that is not state affiliated because of a lack of editorial control. And that seems to be the main point here, that what divides a type of media that has gotten public funds from state affiliated media is that the government exerts editorial control over the news program. That is what he is saying is state affiliated media. Now, the BBC does not have editorial control exerted upon it by the British government. And the same thing is true about NPR. No matter what you want to say about that 1% of funds that comes from the federal government or the federal funds that goes to affiliates, and then those affiliates pay NPR, none of that has resulted in the government exerting editorial control over NPR. NPR's reporting is independent. It is 100% independent of the federal government. It is constantly criticizing the federal government. It is constantly monitoring the federal government and calling the federal government out when, for example, politicians lie in the federal government, whether it was Trump lying or Biden lying. NPR covered Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan brutally and honestly. NPR covered Trump's administration brutally and honestly. If it was just an extension of the federal government, then why is it so critical of every single current administration that it reports on when it needs to be critical and it needs to be adversarial, as journalists should be, when power is abused or politicians lie or they don't fulfill their campaign promises? The reason why they can be so vicious is because there's no editorial control from the federal government, just like is the case with the BBC, which they have not marked as state affiliated media. Now, I don't know where this is coming from Elon. Maybe Elon Musk is just hanging with a lot of people now, like Kim.com, or maybe maybe some conservative figures who told him that NPR is so liberal and Biden's like liberal, and so therefore like NPR is controlled by the state, and therefore you need to market state affiliated media. Maybe it's just he doesn't like how NPR is reporting, but his guidelines right here should not include NPR. The guidelines here. Let's read one more time. State-affiliated media is defined as outlets where the state exercises control over editorial content through financial resources, direct or indirect political pressures, and/or control over production and distribution. None of this applies to NPR, just as equally as none of it applies to the BBC. But they've applied this label to NPR anyway, which is not only going to confuse Twitter's audience, but then deprioritize it in the algorithm. Now, this pissed me off. And so I decided I was going to go looking around at something that, you know, may be a little bit more deserving in the American media circuit of being labeled state-affiliated media. So let me show you what I mean. So here's NPR labeled state-affiliated media. So let's move on to Radio Free Europe, also known as Radio Liberty. Now, I want to just get this right out of the way. Just because I'm making the statement does not mean that Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty has not done good journalism, does not have good journalists, or does not do good reporting. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is just American control and state control over Radio Free Europe. Now, Radio Free Europe used to literally get marching orders from the State Department and the CIA. It got money and funds directly from the CIA covertly until the 70s. It has acted as a voice of the United States and countries all around the world during the Cold War, and still does to this day, with a large amount of its funding coming from the federal government. Now, this right here is an organization that directly got funded by the CIA. Directly. But it never got funded by the CIA. BBC never got funded by the CIA, or MI6 in that case. Let's read a little bit about this. Radio Free Europe is a United States government-funded organization that broadcasts, reports, news, information, and analysts to countries in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Caucasus, and the Middle East, where it says that the free flow of information is either banned by government authorities or not fully developed. It is a private nonprofit corporation supervised by the U.S. Agency for Global Media, an independent government agency overseeing all U.S. federal government international broadcasting services. It broadcasted during the Cold War. RFE was broadcast to the Soviet satellite states, including the Baltic states, and targeted the Soviet Union, and was founded as an anti-communist propaganda source in 1949 by the National Committee for Free Europe, while Radio Liberty was founded 2 years later. The two organizations merged in 1979. Communist governments frequently sent agents to infiltrate their headquarters, and the KGB regularly jammed its signals. It was headquartered in and it goes all into it. And you can see all of its funding from the CIA, how it got marching orders from the State Department and the CIA, all of that stuff. Now, if you go to Twitter, it is not considered state-affiliated media, but NPR, which has never gotten marching orders from the CIA, which has never gotten money from the CIA, which only gets 1% of its money directly from the federal government, and has complete editorial independence, is marked as state-affiliated media. Next, Voice of America. Voice of America is the state-owned news network and international radio broadcaster of the United States of America. It is the largest and oldest U.S.-funded international broadcaster. It was established in 1942. It was signed into law by President Gerald Ford in 1976. VOA is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and is overseen by the U.S. Agency for Global Media, an independent news agency of the federal government. Funds are appropriated annually under the budget for embassies and consulates. As of 2022, it has a weekly worldwide audience of 326 million, up from 2016 when it was 236. Voice of America is seen by many listeners as having a positive impact, while others see it as American propaganda. It also serves U.S. diplomacy. You go to twitter.com, marked as government funded, but not marked as state-affiliated media. Huh. You know what this feels like? It just feels like he has a grudge with NPR. The label for state-affiliated media, by Twitter's own standards about what is and is not state-affiliated media, NPR clearly and distinctly and provably provably does not fall under that label, but it is still going to be penalized as if it was state-affiliated media. I don't know why he has a grudge against NPR. I don't know who whispered in his ear to make him want to penalize the good people at NPR who go through enough shit and get enough slander as it is and do a lot of great work and a lot of great reporting on not only world affairs, but on the current U.S. administration, which it has been vicious in its reporting of Joe Biden many times, especially the Afghanistan withdrawal. You should go check it out. Same thing is true about Trump's administration. Same thing is true about Obama's administration. And same thing is true about Bush's administration. But here it is being labeled state-affiliated media. Now, this is all on Elon Musk's watch, the person who took over Twitter.com to make it the free speech platform, the free speech website. He wanted to make it the public forum, and now he's penalizing NPR, even though it was literally used as an example by the company up until this point of a media company that could be funded by the government but not be considered state-affiliated media. But now, for whatever reason, he's formed a grudge, and now he's crusading against NPR. Now, I wanna contrast this with something else. I wanna move on to something else, because for all of this, like, oh my goodness, we need to call out NPR for being state-affiliated media, all this, working on behalf of the government. I want to talk about Elon Musk working on behalf of the government of India, when it comes to censoring critiques of Narendra Modi. Now, I've already covered this a while ago. I think it was like 2 months ago I covered the story. I don't know if I made a YouTube video out of it. I forget. But around 2 months ago, Twitter, due to the requests of the Indian government of Narendra Modi, was removing links to a BBC documentary that was critical of Narendra Modi and how he handled riots earlier in India's history. It was being posted by politicians and political activists, and due to the government requesting for it to be removed, he removed the documentary. The government says, hey, this documentary, we don't like it, it's critical of us, remove it. And the free speech warrior salutes and says, yes, sir, Mr. Narendra Modi, I'll remove anything critical of you as long as you ask me nicely, sir. Please, I'll do anything to have access to that sweet, juicy Indian market. I will cave on every single value I have if it means staying in your good graces, Mr. Modi. Oh, please, what you're doing in Kashmir is beautiful. What you're doing in Punjabi province, oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful. Do whatever you want. We'll remove all criticisms you have, all the critiques. I'll remove them. Now, you think I'm exaggerating. You might think I'm exaggerating. Like, okay, they removed a BBC documentary. It is what it is. It's bad that they're removing BBC documentaries critical of Narendra Modi and acting as an arm of censorship for the Indian state. That's bad. But that's one thing. It is what it is. Twitter removed stuff on behalf of the Indian government before. Well, how is this different? Well, it's not just the BBC documentary. Now he's removing more tweets that are critical of Narendra Modi's government. And I mean a lot of tweets that are critical of Narendra Modi's government. In fact, he seems to be fulfilling the majority of the requests by the Indian government to remove these tweets. Now, the thing that gets me about this widening of the censorship on behalf of the Indian state, which under Narendra Modi is going in a more and more authoritarian bent, which now Elon Musk is assisting them in. The thing that gets me about this is, originally when Elon Musk was asked about this 2 or 3 months ago, when the story about the BBC documentaries getting removed was broke, he said, oh, I don't know about it. I'm very busy as CEO. I'm a busy guy. He like fakes looking at his watch. He's not wearing one. Like, oh, I'm a busy guy. I don't really know what's going on. It's been 2 months since then, when he was made aware of the situation, because apparently he doesn't know what's happening in his own goddamn company. And now it's only getting worse, with now the majority of the requests being made by the Indian government being fulfilled in removal of their critics' posts on the internet. And when I'm talking about their critics' posts, I'm not talking about calls for terrorism. I'm not calling for, I'm not talking about like, oh, they endorse violence. I mean, reposting of BBC documentaries and just like criticism of Narendra Modi. Let's read a little bit about it before I move on to the real kicker. 2 months after teaming up with the Indian government to censor a BBC documentary on human rights abuses by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Twitter is yet again collaborating with India to impose an extraordinary broad crackdown on speech. Last week, the Indian government imposed an internet blackout across northern state of Punjab, home to 30 million people, as it conducted a manhunt for a local Sikh nationalist leader. The shutdown paralyzed internet and SMS communication in Punjab. While Punjab police detained hundreds of suspected followers of Singh, Twitter accounts from over 100 prominent politicians, activists, and journalists in India and abroad have been blocked in India at the request of the government. On Monday, the account of the BBC News Punjabi was also blocked. The second time in a few months that the Indian government has used Twitter to throttle BBC service in the country. The Twitter account for Jamit Singh, a leading progressive Sikh Canadian politician and critic of Modi. If you don't know, Jamit Singh, Canadian politician, a leader of the NDP, a very progressive party in Canada. It's not even in India, but he's a critic of Narendra Modi. His account is now not viewable in India because Twitter decided that they needed to goose step along with the Indian government and ban any account that dared to challenge the glory and majesty of Narendra Modi. Now, the thing that gets me about this is, well, actually, here's the thing. Here's the thing where he says he was too busy to really be paying attention to this. Then we can move on to the thing that's kicking me about this. Under the leadership of owner and CEO Elon Musk, Twitter has promised to reduce censorship and allow a broad range of voices on the platform. But after The Intercept reported on Musk's censorship of the BBC documentary in January, as well as Twitter's intervention against high-profile accounts who shared it, Musk said that he had been too busy to focus on the issue. First I've heard, Musk wrote on January 25th, "It is not possible for me to fix every aspect of Twitter worldwide overnight while still running Tesla and SpaceX, amongst other things." 2 months later, he still hasn't found the time. Musk has previously pledged to step down as Twitter CEO, but no public progress has been made since his announcement. So the thing that gets me about this is that Elon Musk made such a stir over the Twitter files. Like, oh my God, can you believe that Joe Biden's government requested for penis pics of Hunter Biden to be removed from the internet? There was a bunch of other stuff removed as well that shouldn't have been, but all this stuff to be removed. That's so bad for the government to make those requests, and it's worse that Twitter fulfilled them. And we're going to go with Matt Taibbi and all these journalists. We're going to release like 12, 14, 13, 15 different Twitter files for the public to be made aware of this great injustice by the American government. But then when it's outside the realm of the American government, when it's outside the realm of his friends and colleagues who get to tell him that he's based and red-pilled and all that, when it's the largest democracy in the world, India, now he's perfectly willing to fulfill the request of the Indian government, which he was so critical of the American government doing the exact same thing. Not even the exact same thing. What this is, you can't even compare this to what Joe Biden's government is doing. What the government did in the run-up to the 2020 election. This is not even comparable. It's not even comparable at all. It's not even close. It's 10 times, 100 times worse. Because it's literally just, this guy's a critic, ban him. This documentary is critical of me, ban it. This guy's a critical of me, ban him. Literally critical of me, ban. That foreign politician critical of me, ban. And the thing is, Elon Musk's defense for a lot of this, and it seems to be the defense given by a lot of Twitter acolytes for this behavior, is, well, at the end of the day, Elon Musk can only do so much. If the India government is making these requests, Elon Musk has said that he will do what is necessary in order to keep Twitter services active in countries. And so they will fulfill as much of the law as is necessary in order to stay active in the country. And you know what? That's a somewhat convincing argument, you know? Like, he wants to keep this platform accessible to as many people as possible so they can engage in good democratic dialogue. And so if that means here and there he has to, like, you know, make a few concessions. For example, in certain European countries, Russian state media has been banned. I don't think it's at all comparable, you know, banning somebody for literally just being a critic and banning something for being the state media of a nation invading another country. But like, it's probably something he doesn't like, but he had to still do in order to operate within those countries. The difference is here that these are requests made by the Indian government, not demands. This is not the Indian government coming to them with a court order and saying you have to remove them. This is the Indian government requesting that they have to remove them. Twitter literally could have just ignored the requests. I mean that. They could have ignored the request to remove Jagmeet Singh from Indian viewership. They could have ignored the requests to remove all these BBC documentaries. They could have ignored all those requests. In fact, before Elon Musk was CEO of Twitter, that's literally what Twitter was doing. Twitter, challenging orders to remove content, sues the Indian government. Before Elon was CEO, Twitter was fighting for the free speech rights of Indians to be critical of their government when the Indian government was making requests for posts to be taken down. They ended up fulfilling 20% of the requests, but compare that to Elon, and that's like nothing, where the majority of the requests are being fulfilled under Elon Musk, it seems.